Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Barakahak Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai. Double honors to the apostles and elders, a great millstone who rule and teach well. In peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure to the end. This is the brother Ra'aya coming at you with another lesson, and I'm going to start it off with this clip from Redacted's YouTube channel titled, "We're about to see a massive regional war if Israel doesn't stop," Colonel Douglas McGregor says. And hey, this is just another example of biblical prophecy taking place as we speak. And those Israelis, who I'll be referring to as the 1948ers for the rest of the video, aren't the people of the book. The true children of the Most High are known as the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. But those 1948ers are Amalekite Edomites who appointed that land into their possession, as it says in Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 5. And they're going to play a major role in, kicking off the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, the War of Armageddon, the culmination of World War III in Joel chapter 3, which is going to drag in all the major nations into it. The United States of America and NATO in on the side of the 1948ers, and, on the side of Iran, because that's who Israel is constantly fomenting war with, Russia, China, and her other allies. But this is a fair use copyright disclaimer. I do not own any of the footage in this clip, nor do I stand to gain from it monetarily. It is simply for educational purposes, and I'm going to start it at the 4-minute and 21-second mark.
Now, the bad news here, Natalie, is that we poisoned the well in the Middle East. Virtually nobody trusts us. Everybody thinks that we're the enemy. They all know that without us, without our willingness to underwrite the Israelis and provide the equipment and bombs to them, nothing would happen. And we are still the reason, I think, that everyone has exercised restraint.
And hey, that's a beautiful point. Colonel McGregor said, these nations, especially in the Middle East, not trusting the United States of America, because when you look at the history of America, what always happens, America goes to a country or region to so-called bring democracy and peace and freedom and, women's rights. But what ultimately happens? Puppet leaders getting set up, economies and infrastructures and nations getting destroyed, and then all these different Western ideologies just destroying those nations. Feminism, capitalism, the alphabet agenda, etc., etc. And these nations are sick of it, and they're especially sick of the United States of America always footing the bill for what those 1948ers do over in that region. But this is the book of Obadiah. I'm going to start at verse 1 and read to verse 2. And this whole book is dedicated to the judgment of you Edomites, you so-called white people. This is Obadiah 1 verse 1. The vision of Obadiah. Thus saith the Lord Yahweh concerning Edom. We have heard a rumor from Yahweh, and an ambassador is sent among the heathen. Arise ye, and let us rise up against her in battle. And that's what that video is going into. Israel is getting ready, to handle business in Gaza again, which, Trump said that if Saturday all those hostages aren't released, then all hell's going to break loose. But come to find out that ceasefire between the 1948ers and Hamas has been broken by who else but the 1948ers. And then with Trump recently saying, look, the U.S., there's a chance of them taking over, Gaza and expelling the Palestinians. That's just further, stirring the pot in that region and further building up that hate and animosity towards, America and the 1948ers. And it's going to culminate into throwing words at each other, to throwing lead at each other. Verse 2. Behold, I have made thee small among the heathen, thou art greatly despised. And that can go into the reputation of these Edomites, especially in the West, especially in the United States of America, being made small amongst these nations. Because again, they know that the U.S. is behind a lot of this chaos that takes place in, the so-called Middle East, really Western Asia, at the behest of the 1948ers.
I include the Iranians, and I think that also applies to some extent to the Turks, because what's going on right now is almost a universal coalescing of Islamic states against Israel and the United States.
Talk about these allies and how spoiled has become. The King of Jordan visited Trump yesterday and sat there next to him, and it seemed like the Trump administration was sort of speaking on behalf of the Jordanians, and then they came out today and have sort of clarified the position that Jordan was going to go along with the removal of all Palestinians from the Gaza Strip, but Jordan seemed to come out and walk that back and say that's not what we want at all. What do you make of the Jordanian position right now?
Well, the Jordanian government said that if large numbers of Palestinians were forced out of Israel and into Jordan, that Jordan would declare war against Israel. So I think that's the story. What the Jordanians agreed to do is to take some 2,000 severely injured or ill children into Jordan to put into hospitals and so forth from Gaza. And of course, remember that you have General Sisi, who also met with President Trump, and he made it very clear that it's an impossibility. He's got a large part of the Egyptian army mobilized and now sitting on the border with Gaza and Israel. So I think the region is poised for a regional war. It'll begin somewhere in that vicinity, and it'll spread rapidly.
So do you think...
And you heard what Colonel McGregor just said, with the U.S. constantly helping Israel, that's coalescing these different Islamic states and Iran further against the 1948ers and America. Which brings me to 2nd Esdras chapter 15 in the Apocrypha. I'm going to read verses 28 to 30. Behold, an horrible vision, and the appearance thereof from the east, so-called Middle East, where the nations of the dragons of Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Turkey, even though a lot of them are Edomites, they're still considered an Islamic nation, etc., shall come out with many chariots, and a multitude of them shall be carried as the wind upon the earth, that all they which hear them may fear and tremble. Also the Carmanians, which is speaking of the Elamites, who the so-called Iranians are Elamites, the Persians. Also the Carmanians, raging in wrath, shall go forth as the wild boars of the wood, and with great power shall they come and join battle with them. Iran, joining in alliance with these other Islamic and Arab nations, and shall waste a portion of the land of the Assyrians. And when you go to a map of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, it encompassed, parts of the land of Israel. So, these different Islamic nations, as well as Iran, are going to go to war against the state of Israel and shoot missiles and destroy it. And also, them wasting a portion of the land of the Assyrians can go into America as well, because America is also known as spiritual Assyria amongst some other names in the scriptures. And we know that the Iranians and these other Arab nations have sleeper cells in the United States of America, which, Sleepy Joe did a good part in helping, allowing them to get here with those open borders. And eventually they're going to get that call and go to work.
final question on Israel. Is this ceasefire finished? Are we about to see a lot more bloodshed?
Yes. And I think this will trigger the regional war. You're talking, you heard President Trump, he accurately described Gaza. He said it looks like a demolition site. Now, in the meantime, we provide all of these munitions, and the Israelis say they're going to return to the destruction of Gaza. They're going to wage that war. In fact, President Trump also said that he would back the annexation of the West Bank to Israel. That means more mass murder and expulsion for the Palestinians that live on the West Bank. Where else can this be headed but to a regional war? Because at some point, and I think it's close, everyone in the region is going to say, that's it, no further. And they're all going to coalesce. And that's why I worry about not just Iran, but also Turkey. The Turks now share a border with Israel. Let's be frank. Erdogan calls the tune in Syria.
Right. Yeah, he's running the show in Syria.
Right. Well,
Hey, again, the dragons of Arabia and the Carmanians raging, joining together to waste a portion of the land of the Assyrians. That's it with that clip. But the two main nations Colonel McGregor kept mentioning was Turkey and Iran, which brings me to Ezekiel chapter 38. I'm going to start at verse 2. Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog, which is speaking of the Russians. The chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him, and say, Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, Behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws. And that's the Most High putting those Russian Edomites back in that old confrontational Soviet Union spirit, which we've been seeing with what? Their war in Ukraine, them helping with the BRICS to create an alternative economic system to the West in SWIFT, and them ultimately, getting pulled further in to the Middle East for the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. And I will bring thee forth and all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company of bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords, them and their military might. Now here's the key point. Persia, which is the ancient name for Iran, Ethiopia, and Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet. Gomer, which is speaking of Turkey, and all his bands, the house of Togarmah of the north quarters, and all his bands, and many people with thee. Be thou prepared, and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company, your allies that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them. And, Russia and Iran already have an alliance, and Turkey is eventually going to completely betray the West and NATO and ally themselves with the East and Russia, and they're all going to be allied against the United States of America and the 1948ers. But now I'm going to read a little bit of this article from the JerusalemPost.com titled, Israel could strike Iran nuclear sites this year, U.S. Intel document reports. A report by the Wall Street Journal shows Israel may be planning major strikes on Iran's nuclear sites this year, seeking potential U.S. backing under the Trump administration. And like we just saw with that clip from Redacted, all these nations know that the U.S. is at the behest of the 1948ers. And if things keep escalating, which they will keep escalating, they're going to get to the point where they're going to say enough is enough. And then it's game on. An American intelligence assessment determined that Israel may be considering strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities this year, the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post reported Wednesday night. The Washington Post was more specific, claiming Israel plans to attempt a strike on Iran's Fordow and Natanz nuclear facility in the next 6 months of 2025. And Apostle Tahar has deemed 2025 the hopeful year of the deliverance of the elect of the nation of Israel and the destruction of Esau, Edom. And hey, things are ramping up for major plays and prophecies to be fulfilled this year. And whether it's this year or next year or whenever, but Abaratazad is this year, we know that we are close to the end of Esau, Edom, and these heathens' rulership, and the beginning of the kingdom of heaven under the children of Israel. The two articles are based off a report produced by the Intelligence Directorate of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Defense Intelligence Agency, published in January. The assessment, conducted during the final days of the Biden administration, claims that Israel has been considering large-scale strikes on Iranian nuclear sites with the aim of exploiting Iran's weaknesses. Now listen to this. The WSJ also reported that Israel is expected to urge the current administration to back the idea, as U.S. President Donald Trump is seen as someone who could potentially join the strikes. And you know, Donald Trump is all in on helping the 1948ers. He's an honorary Zionist. And like I've been saying throughout the video, whenever things go down, the U.S. is going to be the first and major nation to come to help the 1948ers. But now I'm going to go to Jeremiah chapter 49, verse 20. Therefore, hear the counsel of Yahweh that he had taken against Edom, and his purposes that he hath purposed against the inhabitants of Teman. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out, and the least of the flock are the 1948ers, because these Edomites are the global minority, and within them, those Amalekite Edomites are the smallest group. And as it says, surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. The 1948ers are going to foment something to create a regional war within that region. And you know, as we just read from that article, they're planning on striking Iranian nuclear facilities this year, which would just be what? The spark that lit the fuse. And it's going to draw out the US and NATO in on the side of the 1948ers, and on the side of Persia or Iran, Gog or Russia, Gomer or Turkey, as well as Iran's other allies. Surely he shall make their habitations desolate with them, and they shall waste a portion of the land of the Assyrians. The land of Israel is going to be struck and destroyed, and America is ultimately going to be struck and destroyed, you know, by nuclear missiles. And while the land of Israel is going to be, you know, hit with missiles as well, it's going to be rebuilt after a season, because the true children of Israel are going to inhabit again. But as for the United States of America, it's going to become a desolate, uninhabitable wasteland. But now I'm going to go to Joel chapter 2, verse 20. But I will remove far off from you the Northern Army, the North American Army, the United States military, all branches, the Marines, the Air Force, the Army, the Navy, etc., etc., and will drive him into a land barren and desolate, like a desert, the so-called Middle East, again, Western Asia. And Saudi Arabia is going to be the main staging ground for the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, with his face toward the East Sea. And when you look to the east of Saudi Arabia, which, when you look at the history of America's wars in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia has always been the main launching ground for them. You've got the Persian Gulf, and above the Persian Gulf, Iran. Into the northeast, you've got Iraq, which has parts of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in it, which the U.S. has a military presence in Iraq. And also, as it says in Revelation, the Euphrates is going to be dried up to further allow these nations as militaries to travel down into the Valley of Jehoshaphat. And his hinder part, or behind him, toward the utmost sea, the Red Sea, which the U.S. Navy is currently fighting the Iran-backed Houthi, rebels in the Red Sea. And his stink shall come up, and his ill savor shall come up, because he had done great things. A great slaughter of U.S. as well as other heathen militaries' personnel in, the Valley of Jehoshaphat. But now I'm going to close it out in Joel chapter 3. I'm going to start at verse 9. Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, the heathen Gentiles. Prepare war, World War III, war with Iran, regional war, a battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. Wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up. An example with the 1948ers planning a strike on Iranian nuclear facilities and expecting the United States of America to come to their aid. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. All these nations getting on a war footing. Remember what Colonel McGregor said. The 1948ers risk igniting a regional war. Let the weak say I am strong. Jordan, Egypt, Iran, these other nations, not being scared of the repercussions of the United States of America because of the 1948ers, but going all in. Verse 11, assemble yourselves and come, all ye heathen, and gather yourselves together round about. The U.S., the 1948ers, Iran, China, Russia, NATO, Turkey, etc., and gather yourselves together round about. Thither cause thy mighty ones to come down, O Yahweh, those death angels holding back this great destruction, waiting to get the go-ahead to release it, which is mainly going to happen after the MARKOFTHEBEAST in Revelation 13, verses 16 to 18, which is the RFID/NFC C-hip implant is mandatorily implemented, and that's right around the corner. Let the heathen be wakened and come up to the Valley of Jehoshaphat, which in the Hebrew is Yahweh's Shabbat, or Yahweh's judgment. For there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about for afflicting the children of Israel, which you can read about in the first couple of verses of this chapter. And at the head of that list, as pursuant to Psalms 83, are you Edomites? And also, it mentions you Amalekite Edomites as well, who had a heavy hand in the transatlantic slave trade, putting up the money for it and owning the majority of those slave ships. Verse 13, put ye in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come get you down, for the press is full. The fats overflow, for their wickedness is great. Multitudes in the valley of decision, for the day of Yahweh is near in the valley of decision. And with all these current events taking place, we can see that the day of Yahweh is very near in the valley of decision. So that's it with this video. With this video, I hope you sincere Akim and Akwath were edified. Just keep strong. We are almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babal, Kwam Yasharallah, and until next time, Shalom.